Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Julie Arenz. I am the Sustainability Associate at Edgar and Associates and California Composters Coalition. We work with a lot of larger waste haulers. So this presentation is about serving our local communities, which is what you guys do, and also meeting SB 1383, so state requirements with community compost hubs and edible food recovery. So a little bit about Edgar and Associates. We are a boutique firm for solid waste companies. We're based in Sacramento, and we kind of run the gambit of all of the needs of these very niche companies. So we represent mostly old Italian families and the family companies that they started with the beginning of garbage in California. So we work on greenhouse gas emission inventories, climate action plans, sustainability plans, third-party verification for C&D sites, and we work on ESG, environmental social governance planning. California Composters Coalition, we represent large composters in California. So this is a collective of the larger compost sites that you're seeing throughout California to meet these organics recycling needs. But in addition to that, we really think that it's important to include the voices of smaller composters, because it is really important what you guys are doing here. So we try to influence legislation in California to try and make sure that the voices of composters are included in these new regulations and legislation that's coming out. We like to be involved in the process of these regulations so that it's not just this top-down working with CalRecycle where all of a sudden we get these regs that are written out and they don't necessarily make sense on the ground. How many people are familiar with SB 1383? Okay, so mostly everyone, that's great, I love that. So then I'm sure that you know a lot about the goals of reducing organic waste disposal by 75% by 2025. Wait a minute, it's 2025.
So we need 86 more facilities to make that happen.
Yeah, so I think we all know that we haven't hit that number, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a lot of what we're seeing with these California regulations, are these huge targets that we're expected to meet with no infrastructure or way to meet them. So that's why this is so important, is looking at out-of-the-box ways to try and meet these regulations that aren't just these large industrial composting facilities. So in addition to working with CCC and Edgar and Associates, we partner with Abound Food Care. They're an edible food recovery organization. They're a nonprofit here in California, and they focus on creating collaboration and infrastructures between food recovery organizations throughout California. And so I think that that's a really cool element to incorporate and see where community composters and edible food recovery can work together. So that 20% goal of edible food, so that's 20% of food that is edible and would have gone to landfill instead must go to feed hungry people. So that's over 871 tons per year of food. Which equates to over 300 million meals per year if we're to meet that goal. So that's what is required by the state, and that's what we should start seeing here. And that only accounts for 0.5% of the MSW waste stream. So that's 0.5% that these big haulers are giving up so that they can feed that many people. So it's really important to be able to do that and to communicate that to them. It's okay if you're just losing 0.5% of your waste stream and that revenue to feed this many people, right? So a lot of these requirements fall on jurisdictions. And there's this new weight on jurisdictions to meet these organics recycling requirements. And I think that's why we're seeing a lot of this frustration, because all of a sudden there's all these new things that they have to do in order to be compliant with the state. And there is some funding out there for them, which we'll get into, but it doesn't feel like there's enough funding, and it feels like there's not enough information, and all of a sudden they have to meet all of these new requirements. And so that's probably why when you're starting to talk with jurisdictions, you're getting a lot of pushback sometimes, because they're like, wait, why do we have to deal with this all of a sudden? So now that it is required by the state, a lot of that burden falls on the jurisdictions, and they're the ones who are required to meet this. And so hopefully we can figure out a way to collaborate with them and give them options, right? That's the goal. Make it a little bit easier for them to meet these mandates. Okay, how many people are familiar with SB 54? A couple people, nice. So this is still in its infancy, and this is a new bill that is out. And they haven't written the regulations yet, so we don't know exactly how it's going to translate into regs. But this requires that everything that is marked as compostable actually goes to compost.
That's a big topic.
This means that everything that is marked as recyclable actually gets recycled. It can't just have a number 1 on it with the little chasing arrows and if you throw it in a landfill. You have to trace it to a recycler, show that it's baled, shipped to a facility, and gets turned into another product. Typically with a plastic bottle, gets downcycled into like a bench or something like that, or another type of plastic. But for composters, this is really interesting, and I think that this is actually going to affect community composting too, because it's going to change your feedstocks. It's going to change your inputs. So it also requires that 100% of packaging has to either be recyclable or compostable in California. So in addition to it actually going to where it's supposed to go, it can't have this single-use plastic that you just throw away anymore, which is pretty exciting. It's pretty cool. What we are talking about seeing is that for these larger composters, these industrial composting sites, they don't want this PLA plastic. That's this plastic that's made from plant-based material that actually ends up just they sort it out and they throw it away, right? So right now, pretty much any material that goes into these industrial composter sites that looks like plastic, whether it's compostable or not, they just sort it out and toss it because they don't know. They don't know what it is. So, and then it turns into a contaminant if it doesn't actually break down. So what we might see is an influx of compostable materials in all of your areas. So you'll probably start seeing a lot more stuff that isn't just food waste in the food waste. And we're involved in shaping these regulations so that it can be the most beneficial for composters. So I'd love to hear more about products that you guys like, stuff that you might want to see, things that you have a problem with. I know, for example, like chopsticks can be a big problem for these larger composters because they get stuck in the machinery when they sort them out and jam it up. But that's not really going to be something that would be a problem for you guys. Maybe wood-based products are better. So I'd love to hear more about some stuff that you guys would like to see in that regard. And also just kind of thinking about what this is going to look like in the future for what you're going to have to be composting coming up. So that's kind of an overview of the regs. I don't know if anyone has any questions about those two big bills, SB 54 or SB 1383.
When are they expecting SB 54 to roll out? Actually, come into effect?
Yeah, so it's still really early. It's kind of one of those things where we are hoping that we're going to see regs within the next, we have draft regulations right now, so those are out, but it's like 300 pages. And so we're not really going to know what those regulations look like for another year or so, and then they're going to start rolling them out. So once they write the regs, then we're going to know a timeline. A lot of that just comes down to those details. So we'll know a little bit more in the next couple years.
Any chance there's language being included in any of that talks about the fact that a lot of compostable materials are not actually compostable because they have PFAS and BPA in them?
Yes.
It's a contaminant.
Yes, exactly. Yes, which is why that PLA plastic is such a problem. And so right now you see a lot of those manufacturers are kind of duking it out with the composters. We like joke around, we call it the cage match. And so you'll get like, and a lot of these guys, they're good people. They want to create good products that are getting composted, right? Like, but we'll see like, you know, the head of like Annie's packaging, like saying, hey, this product really is great, it really does work. And the composters are like, yeah, we don't want it. We don't want to see it, we don't want to deal with it, like put it, and we'll get new products too where it says, you know, on it, depending on what it is, it'll say compostable in an industrial facility versus like a backyard compost. And so really and you guys probably know way more about this than I do, but really what we're trying to promote are things that don't have any of this lining, that don't have the PFAS, that don't have a lot of those issues, those polymers that sit on top of the what looks like cardboard, and people don't really understand that there's even plastic on it. Right. So, and then it extends further into things like aseptic materials, like cartons. So you have these cartons that, you know, box water is better, and you look at it and you're like, oh, it's just cardboard. It's like, actually there's a polymer on the outside, and then it's cardboard, and then inside of it there's a lining that's a mix between a petroleum-based product that also has an aluminum-based product together. And so we're hoping that this is going to reduce a lot of that greenwashing. And things like those aseptic materials we won't see at all unless they can figure out a way to actually recycle them, which now they're like stripping off the inside of it, right? And trying to recycle the outside. You know, we somehow survived what our whole society survived before we had plastic. So we were able to still get our ice cream and get our milk somehow, right? So we'll see how manufacturers are going to respond to this, because they don't have a choice. They're going to have to do something. It takes too long.
Is there any way to drop public comment like this?
Yes.
Yes. So there's definitely a way to drop public comment to CalRecycle. You can respond directly
It's
to
on their
them.
website?
Yeah, you can do it on their website. There is, in addition to that, there's an SB54 working group that we are a part of as CCC. If anyone wants to be a part of it, please let me know. And I have cards too if anyone wants to reach out to me to be part of drafting these regulations. And also if people want to be part of it as a group too and put an input for community composters as a whole, there's lots of different ways we can do it.
Thank you.
And another organization that Courtney mentioned who do a bunch of trials on materials is the Bioplastics Institute, BPI. You'll see their stamp on a lot of like compostable materials that exist out there. But they're kind of like a research-based institute that does materials science on compostable materials. They run some trial programs that we actually as community composters can enroll in, and they are paid trials where you run their little research project at your site for them, collect the data that they need, and when you submit that back, they reimburse you for some of your time, essentially.
What was the name of that again?
BPI.
Bioplastics Institute, BPI. I actually was in conversation with them at the beginning of CCGS too, because they wanted to run a trial among some of our community compost sites, and they ended up not. They went kind of back to the drawing board with how they were going to run the experiment. But the last time I spoke with them, they also have a working group that you can sit in on the meetings for, and they're kind of, a couple of our community compost cohort from other states actually was part of that committee that they formed around trying to inform bioplastics generation for all scales of composting. Something they were interested in was, even if we can get these materials to break down, how are high concentrations of those in our compost affecting our microbial communities?
Yeah.
So I found that very interesting that we're taking it a step further than just does it break down? Okay, if it breaks down, still what are the impacts of that in large quantities? So interesting group to check out.
So these are some of the issues that we're seeing with these large-scale composting models, industrial composting models. especially for rural areas. So it's not a one size fits all. We can't go into Humboldt and put in one of these large industrial composting facilities that easily because everyone is so dispersed. It takes a lot more vehicle miles traveled to get all of the material transferred into one place, while all of these little towns are all over on these mountain roads. So it's not as easy as you would, in the valley, where you can take all of these materials down Highway 5 super easily and put it all in one place. So it has a larger environmental impact just because the areas are more dispersed. There's issues with adding food to green waste. So because food can have so many contaminants, because food is more volatile than green waste, where green waste you can just chip and grind it, and you don't have this volatile waste stream. It can be difficult to add that food in and then process it. For these industrial composters, a lot of the time they just want to use green waste for their material and don't want to deal with the food waste. So yeah, transferring from rural areas is costly and has vehicle miles traveled. There's permitting challenges in California. We've seen a lot of these large industrial facilities trying to be built for anaerobic digestion as well. And because the local enforcement agencies are so stringent, it can be very hard to permit these facilities. We just helped permit one. We finally got it permitted, Limonera with Agriment, and I'm gonna talk a little bit more about that company, in the valley, and it took 11 years to get it permitted. And now that we have it permitted, they're not even sure if they want to actually go through with it because it's so costly. And then, yeah, again, the food waste can create contaminant, which makes that compost harder to market. So it is difficult for these large composters to sell their product in the end.
What do you mean by food waste contamination?
So any type of contaminants that go into that food waste, plastics, those stickers,
Everything we just talked about.
everything we just talked about. Not the food itself, it's everything that goes along with it. If it was just food waste that is going into the green waste and we knew for sure that it was a clean product, it wouldn't be as much of an issue. But like you were saying, people don't want to get their compost with little specks of blue in it, even if it is a compostable material. But we're seeing, I've gone to a lot of these sites where I look at their incoming food waste, especially from residential, and it looks like garbage because people just don't care. They just throw it in there, and there's a new equipment that allows to depackage these materials, so it'll take those packages, open them up, take the food out, shoot the packaging out the other side, but even that is costly, and even that is gonna, a lot of the time they put them through these shredders too, and it just, if you miss one piece of material, it shreds it into a bunch of little pieces, and now that's dispersed through all of your compost. So it can be really hard to add it in, or deal with commingled green and food waste. So why community composting is a solution? And this is like all the stuff that you guys know about, and I'm sure I can learn a lot more about. And this is like the slide that's new and exciting for my industry, because all the trash guys are like, oh wow, that's so cool, look at all these awesome things you can do with community compost. I had no idea.
You're not for sale, you can't use us.
So, of course, there's all of these awesome benefits. You're locally based. The big one here is you don't need a permit for smaller scale composting. There's immense community benefits, food access, education. Something that's really interesting for getting funding too is that you can tie it to housing values. So green space and community gardens increases the value of the property in the area. And we're seeing in developments these community benefit agreements where these new developments that are happening, in order to get it built, they'll sign these agreements with food recovery organizations, community composters, to generate funding for these programs in their area. So something that's kind of cool that's tied to development. But I think that is a great benefit, right? Is local workforce job creation. So yes, that is something to add. I don't know if that's something where developers would be super excited about it, but for us, I think that's great. So here are the regulations for community composters. So if you wanted to scale up what you're doing, this is kind of the limit of what you could do in California without a permit. So you're kind of under the radar if you're under 750 square feet and 100 cubic yards of material. So that's 100 cubic yards of capacity, so any material at any given time. And then you're exempt from a solid waste facility permit. You don't have to go through an EA notification. You don't have to deal with water board. You are like fully in this community compost exemption, which is great. So it's amazing that we have that so that we can do these community programs. But this is actually a fairly good amount of material and a fairly good size. Yeah, so.
That's more than this entire house filled with soil.
Also, on average, our biggest site is 20 cubic yards, to just give you the perspective that we're not even running that close. Only one site in the history of CCGS has done 100 cubic yards, and that's mainly because they were a chip drop location. And they had piles of mulch, and that's considered part of the material that can be included in that 100 cubic yards.
And I'll also comment that, like, again, from my own personal experience with my county, a lot of times the numbers that are predicted for how much waste is actually being generated in an area are not based on reality.
Yeah.
Our numbers are based on our population, not on actual waste generated. It turns out the last waste audit that they did for Butte County was back in like 2021, before this program started, and not all of the waste even goes to our landfill, and that's what they were basing all of this off of. The actual county folks who work at the landfill are estimating that we maybe produce 1/10 of what CalRecycle has said that we need to be accountable for in our county. And all of the waste haulers locally know it, because I've spoken to all of them and they all agree that we're producing a fraction of the food waste that they are predicting that we're producing. Yeah, so just also throwing that out there, that it turns out in a lot of these places, like, our seemingly low capacity is actually really significant
It's enough.
in the grand scheme of things.
It's enough space.
Yeah,
And
that.
750 square feet and 100 cubic yards, if you take more like densely populated areas like Chico versus Paradise, that 100 cubic yards, having 40 of those is enough capacity to manage the entire county.
Totally, yeah.
So when we talk about centralizing big facilities that cost thousands, millions of dollars in 11 years, could be an unnecessary part of the process when literally the house is on fire. Why are we not putting it out in this way? And it's so doable.
Also say too, going past that, if you do have like a desire to be a more of a scale facility, I was able to get permitted with my county to up to 12,500 cubic yards, I believe, on site. They did cap that because of our size, but it wasn't that hard.
Was it green material? Just green?
It was a compost facility, so we were just capped under, I think it's the state's regulation of 12,500. Anything above that moves into like a more permittable tier. But that zone, that sweet spot in there, if you have a desire to do like a scaled compost operation, it genuinely wasn't that hard. I was in Nevada County.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
very, very easy to work with.
Yeah.
I don't know about Butte. I imagine where I'm at now might be harder, or wherever you are. You know, basically I came fully prepared. Did all my research at the state level, what the requirements were, and came fully prepared because the local enforcement agency in Nevada County had never seen, no one had ever presented that permit or request. So they were like, oh, okay, well, let me see what you got. Tore through it. They came out, 2 site visits. We were clear. Water board came out. We were clear. It was really, honestly, easy. So I wouldn't fear if you are, because
Are you accepting food material?
no.
I will say real quickly too, under that same, what is it, the 17,855
Excluded
Um,
activities.
excluded activities, is also vermicomposting. And any material that's in a vermicomposting pattern is exempted from your feedstock total yardage on site.
As well as a
Oh, nice.
facility permit.
Does that count if you're doing a combination of the static piles and vermicompost?
That's what I do. I've probably got about, oh gosh, way more than I want, but probably a good 150 yards right now of compost, and about half of that is vermicompost.
Okay.
So when the LEA comes out,
You say 100.
you know, they, I mean, it's big piles, you know, we have, well, and that's just the one site. I've probably got another 50 yards or so in Philbrook, but, yeah, they come in and they take the temperature of it. If it's below 131 degrees, no, mainly, they won't even usually consider that as being active compost. But that's a little bit tricky because sometimes it's still active. It just might be either not mixed properly, or it's on a down, you know, phase of its processing or whatever. But then, you know, obviously with worms, if you're doing those right, they don't come up to temperature. And if there's an actual population of worms in there, you know, I just go in the pile, pull it out, you know, they take the temperature, they see the worms and exempt, you know, so it comes right off the top of the, so they'll you know, they'll say, okay, that's 50 yards, that's 50 yards, that's 75 yards, and I'll say, well, that 75 is vermicompost, you know. So they go, all right, you know, done, you know.
Nice, that's awesome.
Now the 750 square feet, that
Yeah.
And just a quick comment on that, and then I'll let Julie continue, is the 750 square feet, I know in the conversations I've had with our LEA, what they're willing to do sometimes, especially if you try to have a good relationship with them, if at all possible, is they'll not maybe take into account the perimeter of your site, because I know a lot of community gardens, you'll have like bins over here, and then maybe you're curing stuff over here, and maybe a drop-off pile over here. Often I've heard that they will be kind and kind of measure the footprints of your different parts of it, and if that doesn't add up to 750 square feet, they're usually satisfied. I can't speak to all of them, but I know our LEAs.
Yeah, that's how
The LEAs, they're like two different parts though. One is a zoner and planner that's about your land use, and they're in two-dimensional. They're the ones that care about the square footage. And then the facility permit, more counter-cycle LEAs, like your environmental health department, they care about the volume, and they're more concerned about the three-dimensional stuff.
We really only have one person who does all of that, and she's the only one who does site visits in our county.
Yeah.
So her name is Kim. She's lovely.
Good.
Well, and having that relationship with your LEA is so important, right? So a lot of that is that relationship and is that communication. And all the LEAs are all different. So it sounds like you have a great LEA that you can work with. I know depending on where you're located, it can be very different.
Yes, absolutely.
We were visited once years ago and have been forgotten about since. And they didn't even mention any numbers. They were just like, this looks fine, see you never. Okay.
So I have a cute little community compost hub model for scaling up. So this could be a really great way to.
This is great.
So this is a really great way to meet SB 1383, and like Courtney was saying, you know, when in these rural areas, this could be a way to fulfill this need by your jurisdiction to meet these requirements without shipping your materials, you know, 4 hours away in order to get it managed. So I have small scale composting, meeting that those regulations on that previous slide. Here's a food scrap drop off. So if you know members wanted to bring in their food scraps, community compost and mulch pickup. So if you wanted to distribute it out to people who are going to drop off their food scraps, maybe they can pick up compost too. Transfer station and a little community garden. The transfer station here is kind of interesting because I think it allows for you to bring up your scale. You know, if you have a restaurant that comes in and wants to tip a large amount of food waste, they could drop it off in this transfer station and then you have time to work it into your compost. Or vice versa, if you have finished compost that you want to be able to sell or distribute, or you have someone who wants to buy it, the transfer station could be an area to move it out of this the composting area, and then get it off the facility.
I will say the term transfer station though is a litigious one,
That's
and,
another
and it's a
permit.
necessarily permitted activity if you have a transfer station.
Yeah,
So just verbiage wise, you might not want to call
transfer
it.
area.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to do a couple of shout outs to some programs in Sacramento that I'm excited about. Rio Soil Sacramento, I know Dominic's here and he knows a lot about this too, and he's going to talk about his program also, which is very cool in Sacramento. But they just do essentially that, have their community food scrap drop-offs, and they're able to get this out to community gardens and capture some of that food waste that we're seeing. Another model that we're working on at Edgar & Associates, and this would be that EA notification tier with just the green waste. And so something that we're working on is that we call it a carbon farming model, where, and a lot of this is to meet procurement, which I'm going to get to after this, is, and it sounds like we already kind of talked about it a little bit, where you can scale up, use just this green waste material, and then we're actually land applying it on ranches. So this is Van Vleck Ranch. They are in collaboration with Agerman, who is a composter that we work with, one of our clients. And in this, you can see this kind of green triangle is where they have land applied compost from green waste. And then the areas on the outside where it's brown is where they haven't applied anything. So this is just for ranchers, and so this is for their cattle to come and graze. And it's great for the ranch because they are providing a space to apply this compost where it's not super difficult to use it if it does have some contamination in it, because it's this kind of medium scale, that it's on this wide, range of land. And also it's a good way for jurisdictions to meet their procurement. It's kind of a cheap way for jurisdictions to meet their procurement requirements with this model. So going into grant funding. And right now there is SB 1383 local assisted grant funding that's available. It has to be spent by April 1, 2026. So jurisdictions that applied for the funding have it now. It has to be spent on SB 1383 requirements, and it has to be spent by April 1, 2026.
So they didn't open another round for local assistance. This is the one that they had opened last year.
Correct. Yeah, so this is the...
I got all excited for a second.
Unfortunately, I don't think we're gonna see a lot more funding for organics from Cal Recycle in the same way that we've recently seen it. So that Work 7 funding, this OW4 funding, this is probably the last round of funding that we're gonna see for jurisdictions. That might change, but I think that our thought is that this is probably it. It has to be spent on procurement, capacity planning. That's where you guys come in, is the capacity planning. Program evaluation, edible food recovery, education, equipment, record keeping, personnel, or indirect costs. So those are all the lists of where jurisdictions can spend it.
I would argue that we come in on every single one of those points.
Yeah.
For sure. If you're reporting to Cal Recycle, they put you in capacity planning.
Yeah.
So here are some of the jurisdictions that I know have funding right now, and I think I captured most of the ones that are in your guys' areas. I also have the list of funding, so the dollar amounts that they were all granted and those specific jurisdictions, and I can send that document out to everyone to see the list of jurisdictions and how much money they have to spend by April 1, 2026. So it's kind of interesting the way that they did it. Humboldt County and the Humboldt area, each one of these cities applied separately. And if you don't see your jurisdiction on there, it's because they did not apply for funding and they don't have it, for Humboldt and Siskiyou specifically. I believe I captured everyone for Butte County too, but we can always double check it. So Humboldt area, everyone applied separately, and those jurisdictions are in charge of their money on their own. Most of them received $75,000. That's kind of the minimum to grant out to these small populations, but it could be more. So, little Trinidad's in charge of their $75,000 just for their jurisdiction. Siskiyou County, all of these jurisdictions got together and they did a joint application. So they have, all of the money is pooled into $750,000, and all of those jurisdictions are supposed to collaborate together to decide how they want to spend the money.
Interesting.
And it's just because of how they applied.
Bit of an experiment in real time there,
Mm-hmm.
seeing the collaboration versus the independence. I imagine the collaboratives will do better.
I don't know.
We'll see.
I don't know, and I can talk more about the details of our experience in Siskiyou and how we would love to be able to empower you guys to access some of this funding. If we want to talk about that after, or we can get into it now also. Also Del Norte, those are all applied together. And then Nevada County, City of Chico, Oroville, and Paradise, those are all separate. Yeah. So also in Siskiyou County, you guys are an open franchise agreement, so anyone can haul in Siskiyou County. You don't have to worry about it. So same in Sacramento, we have open franchise agreement, anyone can haul. So really it comes down to the collection. The collection is where they draw the line.
Like processing, you mean?
Processing is
I-
not regulated.
Collection and hauling, I typically think of as the same thing.
Yeah, collection and hauling, exactly. So that's where the franchise agreements have an issue. So,
So you're saying anybody can process, but only certain can haul, or the other way around?
anyone can process as long as you're under that exemption.
Okay.
And
But the franchise agreement applies to the hauling.
exactly.
Okay.
And so, and then the franchise agreement, once you get into these larger scale composting, it can also affect that as well. But generally, it's just about hauling, the franchise agreements. So, and it all just depends on the agreement that you have in your area. It's that fine print. But Siskiyou, it's open. You can do whatever collection you want, and you don't have to worry about a franchise agreement. And it is nice to create an ordinance for your city if you want to carve out a little space for yourself for collection and composting, just so that your city knows that it's happening. If there is any issues, you say, hey, look, I have an ordinance, it's right here, everyone's covered, everyone feels safe. And that's when it's helpful. But when you want to do any type of hauling or collection of materials on your own, and you're in a franchise area, even if, technically, even if you're going, I know there's ways to skirt around it, but if you talk to Recology or you talk to your franchise hauler, technically if you're going and picking up any material and you're collecting it and you're processing it, that is a violation of the franchise agreement.
And in some instances too, if you really just wanna be upfront, you can also go to your waste haulers who have those franchise contracts and ask them for a carve out.
Yeah.
Or just a cooperation unit. Formal is better, but, there's always the possibility they are still human beings, and oftentimes they have some kind of a local office. In Paradise, we actually have Northern Recycling and Waste, which they are a franchise hauler, they're not actually fully local, they operate in Sonoma County as well, but they're fairly small, and they have an office in town. You can go and talk to the person who runs that company. And what they've offered to let us do is they have a tiny transfer facility in the town of Paradise, and they've offered to grant us access to that where we could move that material from there to our compost sites after they collect it. Which definitely isn't ideal, but it's a possible step in the direction of getting the town to be excited about it, because one of their longtime businesses is also willing to cooperate.
Do you need to get a hauler's permit for that, or because it's already been hauled, you can just pick up and take it?
Hauling permits, it's a matter of amount that you're hauling at any given time. And often ours is not just loosely chucked into the bed of a pickup truck, it's already in containers, so that's less of an issue. Yeah. Potentially great great opportunity for collaboration, because in rural areas, often you have a lot of farms where,
Yeah.
and one of the points of this is not to
And farms have a very,
hoard and
a lot of
collect as much
clout
waste as we
in rural
can, right?
areas.
Is to reduce waste, but also prioritize where that food goes to as it trickles down this stream, right? It never stops being food. So it's just making sure it gets to the right mouths that are going to eat it at all stages of its decomposition, right? So
With the least amount
upper-
of movement from one place to
Mhm.
another
Yeah.
to reduce the.
Just live
and that
trucking it to
too,
you
but I mean, how
guys.
much livestock could we feed that would cut down on the cost of feed for farmers, which means for us it cuts down on the cost of that good quality food, and they're eating a diverse plethora of all these different things that are coming to them versus just some manufactured feed that they're getting from the store. So opportunities to partner with farmers, like the food reclamation organizations are really great people to partner with to also get around some of these hauling issues, because if all of that food is coming to them, if it's in their possession when it becomes waste, then they are just self-hauling, and that's a relationship with a single entity versus you having to create a network of all of these households individually. And it could be the same with a farmer. If you have a farmer that goes into town to go sell produce at a market or something anyway, if they do a sweep and pick up a bunch of food, take it to their farm, whatever is still edible goes to their animals, you have one place you can go to collect this food waste or have them drop it off once it becomes inedible for them, or compost it on site, because farmers also often have access to land and space to use the compost when it's finished.
And equipment to move it. And water to move it.
You know, so
And
these
employees to watch it.
there are
Usually
ways to get around some of these franchise agreements and hauling that are also just better ways to do this in general. This is my point.
So I will say that because Siskiyou County has all of these jurisdictions that came together to apply for this funding, each one of those jurisdictions has an equal vote on how they spend that money. So it is not up to Wairika, it is not up to Siskiyou County to spend that money. It is up to each one of these jurisdictions should be able to go and say, hey, this is my $75,000. I want to spend it on community composting. I don't want to spend it on a curtain burner, right? So we would love to work with folks from Siskiyou County in the area to try and work with your board of supervisors to spend this money on something better than an air curtain. And I know that Erin and I want to talk a little bit more about it separately, but we'd love to be a resource for you guys to try and do something better with the funding. So another really cool source of sustainable funding that's going to be available is through procurement. So this is part of SB 1383. There's a new bill that just passed, AB 2346 Lee. And under this, do people know a little bit about procurement requirements under SB 1383?
Not really.
Okay, cool. So I'll get into it a little bit.
Territory.
What this means is that each one of these jurisdictions, they have to spend a certain amount of money based on their population to purchase organic products so that they can support the market. So this can be in the form of any of these. It can be compost, mulch, heat renewable energy. It can go to anaerobic digestion. It can go to biomass conversion. It just has to be one of these products that are a result of recycling organics. And this new bill, it expands what you can spend this funding on. So there's a new carve out for community composters in this. So it allows for these jurisdictions to spend 10% of what they were going to spend on purchasing compost and mulch to fund community compost in their area. So what's really cool about that is that it's local. This program, the cheapest option typically for them is to just go to one of these large composters and say, I need to buy 100 tons of compost. And so they just throw money at it. The compost is created and then land applied anywhere in the state. So under that model, it's the cheapest, but now instead, once this bill comes into effect, they'll be able to take, I believe it's 10%, somewhere around there, And the regs aren't written yet, so we don't know exactly how it's gonna look, but they'll be able to take that 10% and actually fund community composters. And this is required annually. So this is gonna be a sustainable source of funding for community compost from here on out, which is really cool. So California Composters Coalition is part of the negotiations with CalRecycle for this new bill. So we would love to collaborate and get your input so that we can make sure that this is actually accessible. I will say that CCC was neutral on this bill because it was such a mess, because of things like that.
Yeah.
It's
We didn't comment on it either.
Exactly. But now that we have it, let's try and like do something great with it. It's the same thing for edible food recovery, which also has a similar carve out. And the way that they wrote edible food recovery, I don't think it's actually going to create any funding. But we're food recovery organizations are going to be part of negotiations, and we're hoping that we're going to be able to turn it into some kind of real funding.
Cool.
Yeah, because we've been doing food recovery in Grass Valley for over 30 years now.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that.
We were, before all of this came out, we were already doing it.
Right. So I actually have a lot more information on edible food recovery, but I know that I am way over time.
Oh, no, you're not. So
I'm
we
not?
have 14 minutes left
Oh,
of
great.
the session. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, awesome.
I cut out an hour and a half because I just knew that this was going to be a really big discussion and there was going to be a lot of questions. So I was like, let's give this plenty of time to play out.
Oh, great. I love that. Okay. So I'm going to share a little bit of information on edible food recovery and how it's going in the state, and how composters can work with edible food recovery organizations, which it sounds like we already have someone who is already doing that.
I have one comment just before we move into a new section about
Yeah.
like the sustainable funding opportunities.
Sure.
Also in rural areas, if anyone is familiar with the Healthy Soils program through the NRCS, one of our local compost businesses has signed on with them to provide farmers who apply for that as one of their regenerative agricultural practices that they want to get funding for. If your compost is STA compliant, which by the end of this program, everyone who is sending in a compost sample, if you pass, your compost will be STA compliant. You can sell compost through NRCS funding to farmers who are enrolled in the Healthy Soils program locally.
Really?
And that program has been renewing. There's a federal Healthy Soils program through the USDA. There is also one through the CDFA just for the state of California. So they kind of double down on that program, and there has been funding for quite a while for that.
And don't need to be on a notification tier for that,
You
just
do
stop
not.
certified.
You just have to have.
And that's why we're giving you all a stop test at the end of this, so that you can go get that.
So, also to add to this, another caveat is that procurement also got delayed for the low population areas, so that says Sioux County until 2037. So this, yeah. So and that's not for or that's for low population, not rural. So for rural areas, it is still required. So which I believe Chico and Butte County is rural, not low pop. So it still would be required, and same for Humboldt, it's still required. It's just Siskiyou and this group that I believe is exempt. But if anyone wants to take a look at the tons that are required for your jurisdictions, we can I can show you the calculator. We can look at the tons that are required to be purchased by your jurisdiction annually, and then we can look at we're putting together just some funding models to try and get an idea of what that might look like and translate into 10% funding.
Isn't the procurement rate pretty low right now? Isn't it like $25 a ton or something like that?
It's really low, yeah. We usually go around, we say like 50, just to be safe when we're estimating for jurisdictions. But yeah, it can be as low as 25. I think 35 is probably more accurate,
Okay.
but it is very low.
Why do they do it by ton and not by volume? Because weight with compost changes based on its moisture content.
Yeah, we
so
wet it
she'll
down,
dry
make a
it
lot
out.
more money.
That's the first thing I would do, to be honest. Why are they not doing it by volume? Why are they doing it by ton?
I think CalRecycle generally measures everything by ton. It's just a result of the waste industry. All of their waste streams are based on tonnage.
And honestly, without taking into account bulk density, volume is just as I mean, it's
Yeah.
pretty, it can be
But
pretty
their compost
subjective.
production calculator is tons in with cubic yards out. It's always a volume output. So
Uh,
why would procurement not still be volume?
They do have cubic yards of compost as one of the options, so if you wanted to go that route, you could.
You could.
But it's just one option for that reason.
So wetting it down with it.
Yeah, but I do agree it's a problem, and that's one of the reasons why edible food recovery is not really gonna be able to get funding, is because they said 1 ton of edible food recovered equals 1 ton of mulch in this procurement bill. And it's like, the amount of money it costs to take food from a generator, make sure that it's safe for people to eat, and then distribute it is thousands of dollars, worth of food is 1 ton. Compared to $35, right, for some mulch.
Sure.
Yeah.
So that's something that we're hoping to try and figure out so that there is
Wow.
funding.
Okay.
Yeah.
Never be afraid to share real data with people from your actual experiences, because just because they think they have numbers that they're basing this off of does not mean that it's accurate.
Yeah, exactly.
Any idea what a ton scales into, like, cubic yards and then cubic feet? Like, we sell 4 cubic feet for $60. Like, you could compare that to tons. I'm sure that's like, a tiny fraction of a percent, like what they're willing to pay versus like what we try and get in the public market. Like, so it basically makes this not an option if we're trying to make any money on the sale of the compost. So it's effectively useless.
Pretty much.
Unless your jurisdiction wants to fund you directly using this new bill with that 10%.
So potentially they
If
could
we can
pay
figure out a way to
more
do it.
for it, but how could they not pay the same rate for everyone?
It's not even necessarily that they're purchasing compost from you. It's just
Oh.
funding your projects.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but the CalRecycle does have a calculator for that metric, so we
Okay.
can look at that, and I can share that with you.
Any idea if
Yeah.
the compost to farm thing that Janelle was mentioning, any idea what that pays per like some sort of metric
Oh,
for?
the Healthy Soils program?
Yeah, I'm curious.
It's pretty low.
It's also pretty low, but it's
Yeah.
higher than procurement. It's
Yeah.
something like $40 a cubic
That sounds
yard or
right.
$45.
That's a lot
And
more
it-
than $50 for a ton.
Yeah, and it differs though, because it's a different price whether the farmer is making the
Right.
compost themselves or if they're buying it.
Oh,
I think it's
interesting.
even
like
lower
you give
if
them the
they're making
materials
it
to make it
themselves.
themselves.
Like,
In that scenario, you give them the materials to make it themselves.
Or you provide it for them to
Provide
purchase
it,
through
yeah.
this program. As long as it's STA approved, then the
Interesting.
NRCS will give them money to buy your compost
Mm.
essentially.
$40 a yard is still effectively
It's like a
useless.
slight
Yeah.
offset.
It's still low.
I was
but
so
it's
excited
higher.
hearing about that, and then doing the math, you're like, I'm basically giving this away. That doesn't even cover my gas to move it.
No, you're, it's at a loss.
If the farmer values your product, then that's like a 40% or a $40 discount per yard in their eyes, essentially.
Interesting.
Mm.
Okay, well, thanks.
It is geared toward, I think, the farmer making their own.
Yeah, it's good to help farmers for sure.
Yeah.
So any more questions, comments, thoughts, before we move on to edible food recovery? Okay, awesome. So how is it going with edible food recovery in California? So right now, we are in the phase of implementation. So a lot of these jurisdictions, they're required to do edible food recovery to meet SB 1383, and they've already gone through the process of identifying their food recovery organizations, identifying their generators, tier 1 and 2. Tier 1 is going to be your big grocery stores. Tier 2 is restaurants, larger restaurants and schools. Yeah, exactly. So they've already gone through and identified these businesses, identified the food recovery organizations, and done capacity planning to see where they can fill those gaps. So that's where most of California is or should be in this process. And for those low population and rural jurisdictions, it's still required. This is one of those things that no matter what, you still have to do. And now what we're gonna start to see in 2025 is the beginning of enforcement inspections. So going after those bad actors, I know for example, there's like Rayleigh's in Sacramento, they send all of their protein to an incinerator, no matter if it's good or not. There are those bad actors out there, and so it's going onto their sites, actually, and this is gonna be, your city is in charge of this. They have to go out, inspect these generators, say, hey, are you sending this to be donated? What are you doing with your food waste? And giving them fines if they're not donating it. So what we're hoping to see is an influx of donations to these food recovery organizations, which is great.
Who are these part-time skilled jobs to go do that? Like, could a community composter take a second part-time job as an inspector and then get all of this inside information of knowing and come back to the group, and we could be mapping this resource recovery so much quicker and better?
I think if your jurisdiction wants to, I don't see why not. Anyone can be doing these inspections. The
Yeah.
inspection, pretty much.
Wow.
It needs to be by the jurisdiction, but I know that there's not a lot of requirements for the people who are going out and doing it. So if you want to do and be involved with these inspections and work with your jurisdiction, I think that's a great idea. I know Abound Food Care, who I am a team member of and is a key partner with Edgar and Associates. They are in charge of inspections for a lot of these jurisdictions because, the city doesn't want to have to take this on. They don't want to deal with it. So they hire Abound Food Care, which is a nonprofit, and the nonprofit goes out and inspects. A lot of the time they're nonprofit organizations or they're private organizations that focus just on auditing. But it's not like there's trash cops that are officially going out. You know what I mean?
I mean, Garco would be an amazing job. Amazing job.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
It's a quick way to become hated, though.
And to get paid, I feel like we all say that every day anyway. Right, but then we could just get paid for it. It would be amazing. It's a side hustle.
Yeah, and another thing that we are working on in Sacramento is a manual to streamline donations for generators. So we can distribute it to every single grocery store and they can read through it because there's such high turnover of what can be donated, what can't be donated, what you're supposed to do with it to improve the quality of the donations.
We get a lot of trash mixed in with the food. People take off their gloves and throw it into the donation box and stuff, and then we can't use it because we don't know where those gloves were, what cleaning supplies they were on.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, ruins the whole box.
Yeah, and it can't be composted either because of the contaminants.
Oh man.
Yeah, so that's my biggest frustration right now with the grocery stores is that they're contaminating the organics to the point where they can't even be
Just
composted.
defeats the whole purpose.
Yes. And they're using us as a free trash person because we don't charge them to pick up their donations, and Waste Management would. So yeah, they're just using us for free trash disposal.
Well, you tried venting those frustrations, I'm sure.
My executive director is too soft to be blunt, so I'm gonna have to go to the managers of the stores.
So it's donation dumping.
Yep.
It's donation dumping, exactly. Yeah.
I'm sure that's a big problem in the food recovery world. Yeah.
It is that it's getting better because there's more awareness around it.
And in some instances, I've seen some actually really incredible success. We've dealt with that also. We picked up from grocery stores for a long time, but now at least 3 grocery stores that I'm aware of in our area have wait lists for people to come collect their produce. So obviously, like the food recovery places get priority. But yeah, if you want to come and collect that, they put you on a list and call you if somebody's not going to show up. So they have like competition over people coming and collecting this waste, which makes me really excited that people got so passionate about. Like, we can't even touch the grocery stores anymore because it gets taken as food before it ever became waste, which is amazing.
Another thing that I find frustrating is that we're the only food recovery. The Nevada County Food Bank won't take the donations.
What?
Yeah. And
The
it's
food
like,
bank won't take it because they don't trust you that
Because
it's
of-
safe.
Well,
they
and
don't
all of
want
that
to spend the
trash.
time going through it.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
that trash.
You know, they get all of their stuff pre-boxed and that's how they hand it out. They don't double check it, they don't do anything. And yeah, like I get calls from people complaining about food bank food, and it's like, we're not the food bank. You're calling the wrong people.
I had a quick question about that. You mentioned tier 1, tier 2. Is that like a pre-plate, post-plate designation? Like human
Sort of.
touch?
Yeah, so it's grouped by tier 1 is going to be grocery stores, big box stores. Tier 2 is more like kitchens.
Okay.
Yeah, so the schools are included because of the cafeterias.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is all pre-consumer though, I think.
It's all
It's
pre-consumer.
still pre-consumer.
Yeah, and so they have to be really stringent on health concerns. So there are some things in schools like share tables. You know, if a kid gets an apple in their lunch and they don't want to eat it, they can put it on a share table or like a share cooler.
And the schools in Grass Valley just finally got permission to bring anything left over on the share table to us.
Nice, I love
Yes,
that.
because
That's
before
great.
they were having to compost it even if it was still good.
Do you
And
have any
it's like-
concerns over that?
Do I?
I mean, kids are pretty gross.
Yeah, but
Your
there's
kid
You're
can
such
hear
a
you.
good dad.
I know from firsthand experience.
personally, I find a lot of adults grosser.
Yeah. I'm just saying, I would have a few concerns.
But yeah, no, it'll still be inspected by our volunteers, just like all the grocery store stuff is. You know, it's still the temperature still has to be taken of anything
Yeah.
that needs to be refrigerated, all of that kind of
It's
stuff.
effectively fine.
Yeah.
Wash your produce.
Yeah.
And yeah, we have that up everywhere, for our clients. Please wash your produce before you eat it. Because, we're not going to spend the time washing everything that comes in from the grocery store.
We
And
have to
something
dry
may
it.
hit the floor,
Yeah.
And if you've ever seen anybody shopping in the grocery store, you should know that you should wash your hands.
Yeah.
Your
Grab,
produce
grab.
before anyways.
I
So I do
know.
want to mention that we are at time for this presentation. I can give you another couple of minutes if you want to.
Great, I'm gonna wrap up
Wrap
really
up.
quick because
They're so patient.
I think we could
Yeah,
all
you're
keep on
so
going for a long time.
Yeah.
No, I love it. This is exactly what I wanted. So I'm super happy to get to have a great conversation. So just to show some initial successes with this program so far, our target for 2025 was 231,000 tons. And the 2022 annual reporting showed that we had 201,048 tons recovered in 2022. So that was the start of the program. So we're actually hopefully can show that we met that goal once we collect the data. The grants resulted in 224 million meals, and there's been a greater awareness about donating edible food, and has also helped a lot with the stigma around it too. I'm gonna skip these. There's definitely room for improvement, and I know that there's a lot that we're doing with Bound Food Care to tackle these issues. But in general, the things that we were seeing that have been the biggest issues is connecting a network of food recovery organizations to support each other, so they feel like they're helping each other rather than competing. And for funding, for food. And so that's really our goal, is to bring those orgs together to feel like they can share equipment, share information about their generators, share sources, things like that.
Wasn't there an app for that, Copia?
There's a bunch of apps for that. Yeah, there's Copia, there's Replate, there's Carrot, there's a bunch of really cool apps for connecting them. Some of them can be like a little bit pricey, but there's also ways to get your jurisdictions to cover it because they're required to make sure that this edible food recovery is happening. In Sacramento, we've been really successful with the regional grant program. We have gotten together all of the jurisdictions, all of them except for Isleton, which is just like this tiny little guy way out there, who didn't want to be a part of it. And so we got everybody together to create a grant program to equitably grant funding to food recovery organizations in the area. It's been great because we're able to give funding to these groups of people who kind of get overlooked most of the time. And this new source of funding that is from these jurisdictions is instead going to these small groups and not just all going to the food bank. It's been really equitable and successful so far, and we're really excited to see what this next year looks like with implementing it. And so it sounds like We all are doing a little bit of this already, but there is a really exciting area for community composters and edible food recovery to collaborate together. Of course, there's, the community garden, where that is a healthy source of food for people using community compost. But in addition to that, I think these organizations can talk to community composters to make sure that their food that isn't edible can actually go into the community composters compost rather than sending it to, like these larger composting facilities. So I think it's a really cool way to collaborate. For any food waste that they might come across, donation dumping, for example. So it's really cool that you have both of those on your location to be able to manage both what's edible and inedible in a really healthy way for people and the soils.
Yeah, we have pig farmers that come get the stuff that's still animal edible, and yeah.
And a lot of this stuff ends up being grassroots. I talk to local churches in Sacramento who are doing these programs, and they have a pig farmer who's a contact, and they just drive it over, whatever's left over can be eaten. So a lot of this is stuff like you were saying that they've already been doing because it makes sense, I have a little shout out here for Matthew with Community Fruit. He has a really cool cleaning program in Sacramento. I'm guessing you guys all probably know him pretty well, but he
No.
Yeah, no.
Only Janelle and I know.
Oh, okay, great. So he has a gleaning program called Community Fruit in Sacramento, where he will leave a little door tag on people's front doors. We have a bunch of fruit trees everywhere. And it says, hey, it looks like you have a bunch of fruit on your tree. Do you want to donate it to the food bank? And so people will call him. He comes out and he gleans all of the fruit off of the tree for them or whatever other edible source they might have, and donates it to a local food recovery organization. And then whatever is inedible, he composts in his community compost, Find Out Farms. So it's another really cool example of how edible food and composting work together. And that's it. So thank you so much for having me. If anyone has any questions, please talk to me more about it. I'm really excited to hear more about what you guys want to do and see how we can support you with funding and with legislation. So thanks so much for having me, and feel free to reach out. I have my contact information, so please shoot me an email, give me a call.